Sanderson is the host of Created in the Image of God, a series that examines the role of religion in society, from messianic returns to the emotive responses transmitted through our culture. Wade fearlessly addresses reality claims from all directions, objectively exploring their compatibility with Holy Scripture. Joining him is Daniel Sanderson, CEO of Planksift, an international philosophy and cultural media outlet, helping emerging thought leaders with personal branding by co-creating organic content. Tonight's episode, Philosophy and Spirituality Meet, an interview with Bill Meacham, Ph.D.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Created in the Image of God. I'm your host, Wade Franson. We have a very special program lined up for you tonight. We're going to have philosopher Bill Meacham, an independent scholar in philosophy, and the author of the book, How to Be an Excellent Human. We'll also be giving away a copy of that book and his book, Exert Free Will, over the course of the show tonight. Let me give you a quick, brief bio intro of Bill. After receiving his Ph.D. in philosophy from the University of Texas at Austin, Bill spent many years as a computer programmer, systems analyst, and project manager. But his deep love of spirituality and philosophy led him to take that analytical mind and point it in a different direction. As an independent scholar in philosophy, he brings the precision required for good software development to the analysis of philosophical concepts and the deep questions posed by philosophy. What is real? How do we know what is real? And what shall we do about what is real? In tonight's show, Dan Sanderson, philosopher and founder and CEO of Planksift, which is a Canadian media platform, as mentioned in the introduction, will meet with Bill and draw out those deep concepts. I'm here just tonight to introduce Bill to you and to ask a few exploratory questions. So let's bring him to the stage. Oops. Here's the real Bill. I actually started to bring on his pre-recorded self. We'll get into that in a little bit. But welcome, Bill. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you. I'm pleased to be real. Pleased to be on the platform here.
Hey, we could have done that. We could have showed your pre-recorded image and asked the audience, "Is this real?"
Yeah, it's not AI generated. It's the real deal.
So, Bill, where are you phoning it in from?
I am in Austin, Texas, where the weather is actually quite pleasant today. Sometimes it's super hot and sometimes it's not, but right now it's nice. And I've been in Austin since like 1968. Got here, just never left. Went to the University of Texas at Austin, got my degree in philosophy. I then had, the only thing I was qualified to do with that degree was stay in academia and teach philosophy, but I was real sick and tired of it. So I got into computers, software development, project management, requirements analysis, the whole thing. Worked for Dell for a number of years, retired, and then got back to my philosophy. And that's so I.
Well, I can very much relate. I remember when I was doing my undergrad degree in theology, and we were trying to figure out, well, so my major was in theology. I had a minor in business administration, and I also had a minor in French, the practical and the impractical. But I was actually looking at doing a double major, and I remember talking to my academic advisor, and I wanted to get a degree in philosophy. And he said, well, that's great if you'd like to become a professor of philosophy and teach philosophy. Your job options other than that might be a little bit limited. And much like you, then, that's not really what I wanted to do at that time. So I never did go and pursue that, which is why we're going to have Dan really get into those deep philosophical questions. I'm just here to really sort of warm you up and warm up the audience around tonight's show. So let me dive into my couple of questions. I love origins, right? Where do things come from? And so what I want to do is invite you to share where you come from. In particular, who were your parents? What motivated them? Where did they come from? And what were your first, earliest memories and experiences like?
Okay, starting at the broadest level, my origins were a spark of divine intuition known as the Big Bang in the mind of God. But moving forward, My
Moving forward a
father,
few billion years.
a few billion years. My parents were from Indiana. My father was from Acton. My mother from, I forget the place. But anyway, they met at the University of Indiana and got along and then had a baby, and that was me.
So you were the firstborn.
I'm the firstborn. I have all the rights and privileges and hang-ups of being the firstborn. So my father was a minister. He was in the Presbyterian Church. And so I grew up in a church environment, religious environment. We went to church and Sunday school every Sunday. And so I was sort of imbued with it. There was, but so he was a minister, but shortly after he had a church or two, and then he became the religious book editor for Westminster Press. So I had a whole, as a Presbyterian publishing house, I had a whole walls of books that he was responsible for. So I would like read the books on philosophy, theology. Not that I read them thoroughly, but that was my formative years. There was something about the broad picture, where do human beings fit in, and there was an answer. The Christian theology, which I studied my Bible and so forth. At some point in college, this was quite a while ago, I read a book that said it was God is Dead Theology, and by John Macquarie, I think his name was. Oh, wow, that's amazing. God is dead. Okay, well, I'm one of those. Rebellious, right? God is dead. Okay, fine. Then I explored lots of different things, other religious things. Very long story, but I ended up being convinced that there is something that we might broadly call a higher power, a disembodied agency of some sort that has a benevolent interest in us. And so that's been kind of part of my life for quite a while. And my interest in philosophy, as I say, got rekindled when I was kind of burning out on software development. So I wrote this book, How to Be an Excellent Human, which contains, it's sort of broken into two parts. The first part is, well, there's three parts really. What is the concept of how to be an excellent human? What's excellent? Well, something really, really good. Okay, what do we mean by good? And there's a whole couple chapters on goodness. Then I take it into so relating to those questions, what's real? And what's real is what we might call a pantheistic panpsychism. And if we want to get into what that means, we can do that later. That's the first half of the book. And then the second half is, okay, now that we've oriented ourselves and we're an element of a pantheistic, panpsychic universe, well, what are we going to do about it? How does this element work? Like it's as if here I am in life in a vehicle. How do I operate the vehicle? How do I, A, how do I operate it? And B, how do I decide where I want to go? And how I operate it, I take a lot of ideas from the mind works, how emotions work, and so forth. And then where do you want to go with it? Return to the original question: what's good? What is a good life? And I come up with what I call the which is to work for the good in all things. By doing so, you benefit yourself because you're a part of all things, and you benefit your surrounding world because that's part of all things. And the basic idea is a sort of a positive feedback. If you work to create harmony and goodness in the context in which you find yourself, sort of a Heideggerian, I'm thrown here in the world. Well, how do I make it good? You make the world you live in good. That world nourishes you. You become nourished. You become able to function. You're able to become wiser and guide yourself and so forth. So that enhances your vitality, which enables you to give back to the world, which nourishes you. There's sort of a positive feedback cycle. Does that answer the question?
That's wonderful. So going back a few sentences ago, when you talked about the two parts, how do you operate in the world and then where do you want to go? Depending on the answer to the second question, would you say that people operate differently based on their answer to the second question?
Yes. Some people, so some people conceive of the world as a moral universe in which there are rules about what's right and what's wrong, how we should behave, and so forth. There's different ideas of where those moral rules come from. Obviously, one of them is God dictates the moral rules, or it's baked into the way our minds work, a la Kant, or something like that. But you think of the world in terms of what you think of your actions and the world in which you act in terms of what's right and what's wrong. I call that the rightness paradigm. The other way is to think of what's good and not good, good and bad, not necessarily good and evil, but what's good and bad. And you find out what nourishes goodness in the sense of nourishment, of what enables us to thrive. And sometimes obeying the rules is a way to do that. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes doing the good thing means violating some rules that you've been taught. So it's a way of thinking about how you act in the world, how you comport yourself. Are you oriented toward goodness, trying to promote benefit, welfare, health, or are you oriented toward obeying the rules? And there's ways those things interact. But
yeah, so lots of questions that I would have to dive deeper into that. I'm really trying to follow the good agreement that I had with Dan and to leave that to him. But I do have one more question that is related to the piece that I wanted to do, which is your origins and your journey to this point. So as you have gone from that divine spark at the Big Bang,
right,
and through your parents and now into this life, how has your operating approach, your compass, your decision as to how you will engage with the world, how has that changed over time, based on your own learning and growing, or has it stayed steady through most of your life, or have there been, some serious left or right turns along the way?
Well, I started off being a self-centered, egotistical, bratty kid.
Most of us are at 1 year old. We're crying when we're hungry. We're crying when we
then
want.
into later childhood and teenagehood, I was like, don't tell me what to do, that kind of thing. I spent a fair amount of time in politics trying to change the world, but for trying to think, one of the motivations for trying to change the world is it's just wrong the way people treat each other, or the way the society is structured, and so forth. But then I realized, well, where does this wrongness come from? So I've somehow gradually moved into, instead of thinking about what's right and wrong, what's beneficial for the most. It's almost the greatest good for the greatest number, but that's another whole. It's not quite that, but it's close. So my motivation now is to try to do good, to be beneficial to those around me and henceforth to myself, rather than trying to obey moral rules. Now, as to where that happened in my development, I couldn't say. It's like a
So it was more gradual.
Okay.
Well, awesome. Well, Bill, we're going to now cut to a commercial break. And the commercial break is from our sponsor, Something or Other Publishing. And it's around the idea of cultural journalism. Something or Other Publishing seeks to promote authors such as yourself, our own authors, and invite others to participate in an ongoing dialogue here on the show, but also a written dialogue, not just religious, also secular, fiction, nonfiction. But we've launched an anthology in conjunction with Planksip called Cultural Journalism. And we want to invite our audience to participate in that. So I'm going to show a brief ad about it, follow up with a QR code. And when we come back, Dan will be in the studio and he will take it from there. So thank you so much for sharing a bit of your early experiences with our audience.
You bet.
Your story has the power to start a movement. Journalism is more than a tool for broadcasting news. It's an important way of fostering meaningful cultural relationships that create tangible change in our society. With our anthology Cultural Journalism, you can now do your part and make your mark. From expert writers to passionate amateur, everyone has a story to tell. Our aim is to promote equality, empathy, and create a safe space for different perspectives and interpretations of the world around us. Come join us today and break free from the toxic news cycle. By submitting your story to Cultural Journalism at info@soupllc.com.
Well, Bill, good to see
Daniel.
you again.
Yes, sir. Good to see you.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that getting to know you section with Wade. That was good, really good. I really enjoyed that background story. I never knew all that was revealed. Origin stories. Who knew that was such an important part of people's existence?
Right. Well, glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. So I wanted to hit something and confront something right off the bat, and that is the title of tonight's episode originally was, and partially still is, "Life Has No Meaning, So What?" And a lot of that is going to be applicable to tonight's conversation, but a lot of it's not going to be applicable. And we wanted to change it, but there's some remnants that will show up. So I thought we'd confront that and find out exactly where that topic came from. And to jog your memory, that's the Weinberg article, and the article that you wrote about one particular essay, I believe. Would you mind explaining what all this nihilistic thinking is all about?
It's not nihilism. As a woman named Rivka Weinberg, who's a professor of philosophy in, I think, Claremont College. I could be wrong about that. She had a show on another series from the Philosopher magazine, and she has a book. She has an essay called "Ultimate Meaning." We don't have it, we can't get it, and we should be very, very sad. It's published in the Journal of Controversial Ideas. And so what I did in my blog essay called "Life Has No Meaning, So What?" was basically rehash what she was doing in that essay and then pick it apart and find some issues with it. Her basic idea is that in order to have meaning, which is basic for her, it's equivalent to purpose. What is the ultimate purpose of something? And the purpose of what you do, whatever you do, is something external to the act of doing it. So she says, when we ask about the meaning of life, we want to know about the purpose or the point of living. It's asking why in terms of motivation. So why are you going to the store to get some eggs? Well, we can ask a further question. Why do you want to get eggs? Because I'm hungry. I want to not be hungry. Why? Then it becomes more general. Why do you want to alleviate your hunger? Well, because I want to not feel hunger. It's painful. And then, it goes on from there. But if you talk about
sounds like the 2-year-old question, like you're in the supermarket and the kid goes, "But why?
Yeah, right.
But
exactly.
why? But
exactly.
why?"
So, but if you get beyond the toddler 2-year-old stage, you can ask more salient questions regarding the human condition that we all find ourselves in. Why are you sending money to Doctors Without Borders? Because I want to help earthquake victims. Why do you want to help earthquake victims? Because I want to alleviate their sufferings. Why do you want to alleviate their suffering? What's the point of alleviating suffering? Okay, you might say, well, because I feel compassion for people who are hurting. Compassion is a painful state because you feel their pain. So that's a kind of what I was calling the goodness paradigm. one answer, okay, I want to become a generous sort of person because that would be a better way to live, again, in the goodness paradigm. You might say, well, I feel obliged to alleviate suffering because the moral rules say so, God tells me so. Whatever the answer is, it gets close to something ultimate, something you might consider the meaning of your life. Okay, so in all of these things, the trivial things, how come you don't want to be hungry, and how come you want to alleviate suffering? The purpose or point of an activity is something you value that is external to the activity yourself. This is what Dr. Weinberg, her basic point. A point in this sense is a valued end. It's something that you are working towards, and it's external to the projects towards which they're directed. Okay, so I want to alleviate suffering because it hurts. So, but it's external to the project of alleviating suffering. The point of it is to whatever it is, become a better person, obey the moral rules. It's external to that. If you talk about, this is her point, if you talk about what's the purpose or meaning of your life as a whole, as opposed to, I mean, you can have all kinds of purposes within life. I want to alleviate suffering. I want to create a just society. I want to exercise my creativity, so forth. Those are meanings within life. But what is the meaning of life as a whole? Well, she says there isn't one. Because if the point of something is external to the activity, and what you're looking at is your life as a whole, there's nothing external to your life as a whole, because if it's external to your life as a whole, you aren't there to even entertain the idea. I'm going over her argument very sort of outline.
Mm-hmm.
So she says, in that sense, there's no point to life as a whole. You can have meanings within life. Oh, I'm practicing my violin because I want to be an expert concert violinist and create music for people and so forth. That's a project within life. What is the meaning of the life as a whole? Well, there isn't any, because there's nothing external to your life. That's the point. Now we can argue with that, but I don't want to go into the argument. But then she goes on to say, well, there's no point to life as a whole. Therefore, you should be very, very sad, because she is life is pointless. So why bother with it? There's no point to it. That's a sad situation.
Mm-hmm.
She claims. I claim, well, if it's really the case that there's no point to life, then it's kind of foolish to be sad about it. It's just how it is. I'm not. If that's the case, that's just how it is. Okay. And I end up the essay, which you can find on my website, by the way, bmeacham.com, and then click on the thing that says blog, and at the moment it's the top one. Mm-hmm. If there's something you can't change, your life has no meaning, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, the ancient Stoics would say, then don't worry about it. It's a foolish thing to indulge in sadness about something that absolutely no control about. So that was my argument with her. There's no point in being sad about it. Just accept it and go on with your life. So that's
well, Wade brings up a good point here. He's hoping for some clarification on the woman. Is it sadness for those who need the meaning, or is it just sad in general for everybody, right? Or for just those that don't desire meaning?
I'm trying to remember what her argument specifically is. It's for people who are looking for meaning in their life.
Yeah.
She argues, well, you can look all you want, but you can't find it, and that is inherently a sad situation. If you're sort of what some philosophers would call a wanton, somebody that doesn't care about meaning in life, just want to get on with whatever pleasures or interests you might have, then it's sort of a moot, you know. if you don't care about meaning of life, then the fact that there isn't any shouldn't bother you. But she claims, she sort of thinks that everybody ought to care about the meaning of their life.
Interesting. Actually, I'm going to articulate something that's a little bit more on the academic side. I remember I've seen this criticism in academia about academia that we don't have a teleology in a predominantly secular society. Now, I mean, again, I don't really want to say that we're predominantly secular, especially because the podcast is effectively anchored in the United States, which is predominantly, I could say, religious, and make the claim for that, because you've got presidents that can't openly say that they're secular. They pretty much have to be God-loving and God-fearing, right? So I can make that statement that we're predominantly a religious society. And I'm thinking of Robinson. He was a philosophy teacher and Aristotelian, and he taught quite a few of these courses on the great courses. And he basically said, this is what we're missing. We're missing a teleology, a goal-directed activity that binds a population or groups of populations, right? And so I wanted to know what you thought about that. Do you think we're in a vacuum with without a teleological
telos, a goal?
Exactly.
Right. Well, we as quite a large population of people. Some people are they have a goal, they're going for their goal, and they're happy to pursue it. Some people don't have a goal, don't care, they're happy not caring. So, probably, I'm guessing, a lot of people would like to have some meaning in their life, like to think there's something more going on than just day to day, keep myself alive so I can get up tomorrow and do it some more. I hesitate to make judgments or assertions about society as a whole, and most people, but probably, I'm guessing, the audience of this particular broadcast are interested in those kind of questions. And it's like, if you want to, there's no shortage of worthwhile things to do. I could create art to help people enjoy beauty. I could work with Doctors Without Borders to alleviate suffering. I could write a philosophy book to enlighten the world, whatever.
I get that, but I think the main thing I was trying to push out was we as a species, do we have anything that we're all aiming towards? And it appears that right now, maybe this is a way to distill down and make a commentary about the modern world. We don't seem to have a unified direction forward when we don't have this overarching deity that we all seem to follow within our culture, right? So for those that fall into that category, would you say that that's an overall good thing or a bad thing?
It's hard for me to make a judgment. If you don't think your life has any meaning and you're totally okay with that, then okay. It's like, let 1,000 flowers bloom. The people that don't want meaning in their life, let them go on. The people that do want meaning in their life, let them find it. Let them try to convince others that their way is a better way than some other ways. What I don't like is somebody who says, I know the meaning of life.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what it is, and you better believe it because I'm right, because God told me, or whatever. To enforce or try to enforce your belief system, your goals, your chosen meaning of life on somebody else is harmful. And I'm not in favor of harming people.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, Wade would come in here swinging the coercion sword left, right, and center, and I gave a thumbs up when I heard you give that answer, because it's very evolutionary thinking, and I think that was how you described yourself right at the beginning as a philosopher, that you incorporate evolution and thinking about evolution into your philosophical
Yeah, I mean, on a sort of basic material level, the goal of each living being is to survive, thrive, and reproduce into the next generation.
Yeah.
That's just part of what the existentialists would call the facticity of life. That's how things are. That's how living things work.
Yeah.
Human beings have the capacity to look at that and look at themselves and sort of extract themselves mentally from the situation and evaluate. It's what I call second order thinking. It's also called metacognition or self-awareness. Once you've got that going, then you can choose. For instance, many people, human beings, want to survive and thrive, but they don't care about reproducing. That's not one of their goals, and they can voluntarily choose not to pursue that biological goal, but they can choose to do all kinds of other stuff. The question is, for those kind of people, what's a worthwhile goal? And my suggestion is, what's worthwhile is in order to survive and thrive and have a meaningful, fulfilling life, you need to work for the good of that which surrounds you, because you're embedded in that. You're as if you're an organ in a larger organism. Like, what's good for your kidney? Well, to have the whole body work well.
Yeah.
What's good for the whole body? Well, the kidney is pretty essential. That kind of thing. It's a biological, organismic metaphor. If that makes sense.
Well, the Greeks viewed that as well. Like the polis had the body politique, right? It's an ecosystem of social cohesion and goodness, all rolled into one holistic ideal.
Yes, it's very, very Greek, very this whole thing about moral rules.
Well, hold on a second, though. Wait, I want to bring Wade in on this, and I know he's going to have a lot to ask you, and I'm actually going to get Wade to watch and wait a little bit more as well. So we're going to go to commercial break, and I want everybody to think about ethics and doing the right thing. When I come back, we're going to play something from Bill Meacham. Okay, so it's a pre-recorded interview, and it's pretty much a monologue, but it's really brilliant to watch. So I encourage everybody to watch it. And when that's finished, it's going to be Wade and yourself, quite possibly me. I'm not sure yet, but we'll be back on the stage. So,
okay, get your popcorn.
Get your popcorn. We're coming right back.
And welcome to Something or Other Publishing, or as our friends like to call us, Soup. Soup is a platform that connects authors, readers, and service providers in one convenient place. Choose Soup if you're an author with a great book idea and you're looking for a publisher offering hands-on coaching in some of the best royalties in the business. Or if you're a reader who enjoys engaging with celebrated and emerging authors. We already have over 3,000 of them, and more are joining every day. You can even win free books by voting on their book ideas. Or maybe you're a service provider and you're looking to engage with over 3,000 authors. We're here to help. So whether you're an author, a reader, or a service provider, you're in the right place at Soup. Contact us at help@soupllc.com to learn more.
Position of understanding what we're talking about. And that's because I'm a philosopher and I like to get clarity of concepts. So we're talking about religion, right? What is religion? I call it any form of socially organized relationship to what we might call an unseen realm of disembodied agency, or to put it in shorter terms, a higher power. Now that could be, I deliberately say higher power as something sort of very vague and generous. It's a power that manifests itself in a person-like way or as an agent that has some benevolent interest in us. Now but I'm really leaving it vague. What is this higher power? What could be ancestors who are no longer living with us in the flesh? Totemic spirits associated with places or objects, genies, angels, demons, deities, such as the gods of the Greek pantheon or the Hindu pantheon or the Norse pantheon. There's a bazillion of them. It could be the all-knowing, all-powerful, and eternal God of monotheism, the God of basically Abraham, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, very similar. But there is one God, and that's the omni God. A friend of mine called it the omni, all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-benevolent, so forth. Or it could be what you might call the all, or the universal soul, or the various words for it, but advanced mysticism is a mystical understanding of what this divine power is. Whatever it is, I'm saying that religion is the organized relationship to that, a socially organized relationship to that. So if you're asking me about how I personally relate to that higher power, that's something idiosyncratic to me. I've had various experiences that lead me to believe, and I'm quite confident that such a power exists in the sense that manifests itself in the world to human beings, in particular to me and others of my kind, that is to say, other human beings, right? So I'm convinced that there is, in some way, a higher power. Now, what leads me to believe that is a bunch of personal experiences I've had over my life and so forth. You've asked about the afterlife. Well, I've had experiences that lead me to believe. My daughter died actually 6 years ago, I'm not sure. She died very suddenly in a car crash outside of Nelson, British Columbia. And bam, it was like that. And she had this. So I found out about the next day when these guys from the Texas Attorney General's office, I think, guys show up and Mr. Meacham, yeah. I'm going, uh-oh, what have I done? And then they told me that was even worse than what I was imagining. And my daughter died. Well, that was pretty horrific. But very shortly after that, I had that experience. I went to see a healer. I was a sort of spiritual healer. And in that session, she contacted Katie, my daughter, and things were said that only Katie would have known. Certainly not this woman I'd never met, not the woman that was translating for me. Things were said that led me to believe, like, sure enough, that was Katie. And then other things happened. If you go to my website, bmeacham.com, and look for a piece, you can search for An Impeccable Death. That's the title of my essay about that. It describes the whole thing. But in brief, I was convinced that Katie was alive, not in her physical body, but in some other spiritual body, something. But that's not the only. I mean, that sort of sealed it for me. Oh yeah, there's definitely an afterlife. But I had already had various experiences. Can't even remember them all. William James has an interesting take on this, and he has an essay called "The Will to Believe," which, in my opinion, should have been called "The Right to Believe." And he talks about various kinds of evidence. The atheists or agnostics will say, well, there's no clear evidence for the existence of God, let's say, a higher power. Well, James says, in the absence of scientific proof, you can choose to believe on the basis of subjective evidence. Evidence such as you've had experiences, like in my case, I've had words appear to me in my head. It's not like I heard voices from outside. It's like words appeared to me, just heard the words exactly what they were inside. Anyway, that, and I've seen sort of visions of unexplainable things. And then, of course, this thing with my daughter, Katie, lots of things. And so I choose to believe, and it's not like you can choose to believe. The evidence is overwhelming to me that there is such a thing. Okay. So how do you know that evidence is justified? Well, if the effects of your belief are beneficial, if, for instance, you're happier and you function better as a result of such belief, then you're justified in having faith in the higher power. Well, as far as I can tell, my life's been going pretty well. How it would have gone had I not believed in a higher power, I don't know. That's a different timeline. I'm not on that timeline. I'm on the timeline that tells in which I have had these experiences. So religion, but that's my personal relationship to the higher power. Religion as such is a socially organized relationship. It's a way of dealing with this stuff. Now, there's various theories as to how religion got started. What's the evolutionary origin of religion? One of the main theories is that we humans have the ability to, it's called theory of mind, which is not quite accurate, but we have the ability to interpret and understand the mental states of other people. It's almost like mind reading. It's not really mind reading, but we can understand their intentions and their beliefs and such just from their actions and what they say. Okay, so we attribute agency to various things we encounter in the world. And in fact, up until relatively recently with the scientific revolution, that was the primary way of explaining things. If somebody asked, well, how come the thunder rolled just at the time that baby was born, the answer would be because of some agent, some god, some ancestors, something talking to us humans here, rather than, it's electrostatic discharge and that kind of thing. So the idea of thinking of the world in terms of agency, obviously the social world, our human world, and we all interact with each other. We're all agents, okay? Animals are agents. Even plants, in some ways, are agents. There's videos of plants growing up, and there's a time-lapse photography, and this plant's looking for something to hang on to. It's like I think it was a beanstalk or something. And you can see it wiggling over here and then wiggling over there. And it's a time-lapse thing, so it looks like it's going fast. In real life, it's going very slowly, but it just really looks like it's reaching out. As soon as it grabs something, it holds on to it. It's just in some way, plants perceive their environment and react to it and do things in an agent fashion. Okay, so that's a little off the subject, but humans have the ability to attribute beliefs, desires, and a certain amount of cunning to anything that moves or seems to do so with attention. Things that move of their own volition, we say, move on their own, as opposed to being moved by impact from somebody else, something else. Okay, so humans have this idea, this ability to attribute agency. Some researchers have called it a hyperactive agency detective device. And evolutionarily, it was more beneficial to be overreactive than underreactive. You heard a rustling in the leaves. Like, that might be a tiger. I'm going to hightail it out of here. Well, it might have been just the wind rustling the leaves. Or it might be a tiger. If you're wrong, no harm done. If you're right, it's a good thing. You notice it was possibly a malevolent agent and you got out of there. If, on the other hand, you were saying, agent safety, it's just rustling the leaves, blah, blah, blah. And then the tiger pounces, well, you're dead and you were not one of our ancestors. That's why we have only the ancestors with this very developed agency detection ability. Only those people that came before us were our ancestors. That's why we have it. Okay. And then there's a whole story that the atheists tell about how we have this agency detection device, and then it got overblown and it basically ran amok. And now it's useless, and there's all kinds of bad things that happen because of religion, and we should just get rid of it if we could. It's a meme being kind of an idea or behavior or style that reproduces from person to person within a culture, kind of like genes replicate from generation to generation of living organisms. Now, nowadays, the term meme generally means a picture with some words on it. That's a subset of the original meaning of the term meme. All right, so we have this meme that there's some kind of disembodied agency, might be the ancestors, might be a god, whatever it is. And then there's a whole story about how that gradually accreted into religion, and the priests took over, and they're oppressive, and it's all a nasty thing. So on the one hand, we can say, oh, religion is this parasitic, harmful thing. A meme started out as a mistake, took on a life of its own. There's another aspect, though, that even given the same story about how religion arose, religion is beneficial. It's been evolutionarily adaptive because it binds groups together in a way that enhances the survival of the group, enhance the survival prospects of everybody in the group. Jonathan Haidt, famous, well-known evolutionary psychologist and social psychologist, calls human beings groupish as well as selfish. And the group thing, being caught up in membership in a group, that's very satisfying to us. And religion is a way of doing that. Well, there's non-religious ways of doing that. You go to a football game and you put on the colors of your team and you hang out with the other fans of your team and you cheer and so forth. There's a really feeling of solidarity, and there's a groupish feeling of that's very it's fulfilling. Well, you take that and you put it in the context of religion, it's all oriented around some notion of God or higher power or whatever. That's the power of religion. It creates cohesion. So just as there are two stories about how religion, there's actually one story about how religion started, but two stories about whether it's a good thing or not, and whether it's adaptively beneficial or not. Two stories, right? A, no, it's not. B, yes, it is. Similarly, there's in the religions we find ourselves in today, we have religion at its worst and the religion at its best, and most religions are in between, right? But I'm going to talk about the sort of the extreme cases so you can clearly see them. Religion at its worst is terrible. Hideous things have been done in the name of religion. Slaughter of infidels, the abuse of children and women, lies, deceit, hypocrisy, arrogant exercise of domineering power, punishment, cruelty, war, intolerance, crusades. I mean, there's just no end of awful things that have happened in the name of religion. But there's also many beautiful and noble things come out of religion. Okay? Feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, housing the homeless, comforting the afflicted, standing up for the oppressed against the abuses of the dominators. And of course, social cohesion, community. Religion gives you a sense of hope or confidence in the face of adverse circumstances. So, a friend of mine called it an invisible support system. And you're asking about my personal relationship to religion. That's been huge. If I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed with life, alienated from people, whatever it is, it's comforting for me to know that I'm not alone in this. And I think a lot of religious people would say, but yeah, not alone. God is with us. Okay. And evolutionarily, people have had a sense of hope because of religion, because of their connection with the higher power, probably hung on better under adverse circumstances than those who didn't. So there's another hypothetical reason for believing that religion was good for humanity. It has beneficial effects. Okay. You get guidance. I get guidance from connection to the higher power. So there's religion at its worst, religion at its best, terrible things, good things. Okay. So far I've been talking about religion from an external point of view. How does evolutionary psychology explain what religion does? How do memes work, or religious memes and so forth? Okay, we've been taking an external view, sociology, social psychology, evolutionary psychology. In that sense, all religions are similar. They all lead us to or engage us in some kind of higher power with some aspect of agency. And it could be, an actual person like God, like Thor or Athena, or the god of the monotheists, or it could be something a little bit more vague, like the Tao or the universal mind of Buddhism, which is not terribly theistic, but it still has that sense that there's something bigger than we are, that if we tune into it and accept its guidance, things will work better. Well, all right, so all religions are similar in that they lead us to a connection with that higher power, however we might conceive that. You can think of each religion as a well, and all the wells draw from the same deep aquifer, but they come out in different ways. So each one is different. Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and so forth, but each has a particular gift to a particular way of relating to the higher power that was certainly meaningful to the people at the time that religion started up, and is meaningful to others, our descendants and so forth today.
Discover the world's religious traditions like never before with Ocean 2.0 Reader. Our custom ebook reader is designed for exploration and study, with an immersive audio-integrated reading experience and powerful research tools. Available on all platforms including web, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Android, and iOS. Experience the benefits of immersive reading by combining ear and eye, and improve comprehension and vocabulary acquisition, and with our interfaith library featuring books from Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Jainism, Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, Islam, and Baha'i. You'll have access to a wealth of knowledge. Try Ocean 2.0 Reader today and elevate your reading experience.
Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for sharing that lengthy exposition by Bill. And Bill, thank you for giving that. Ocean 2.0 is a creation of some of the friends we have down in Florida at the Clearwater Baha'i Center. This is also being streamed live to their Facebook page. They are also one of our sponsors. And I can't think of a better ad really for some of the teachings that are espoused by the Baha'i faith than some of the things you were saying. And that ad for Ocean 2.0 kind of expresses that. I have so many questions that I'd love to dive into a little bit deeper. I'm going to go back to one that came at the beginning, and then we'll come back to this idea of all the religions having something special, which I love. But you talked about, well, last week we had, see you, Dan. I thought I'd drag him back in, but I guess he wants us to.
I'll come in if I have to.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I wanted to go back to something you said towards the beginning of that exposition, because last week we had a couple of guests here and we were talking about the COVID pandemic, and they were talking about the science, right? And in the context of where they're coming from, they were saying that your personal experience is not relevant, right? Because the data in science, and given that you've been in the computer field, you understand what is meant by that, right? That one's own individual experience is overridden by 1,000 data points that essentially prove you wrong, right? When it comes to scientific inquiry and the study of data. So I want to bring a quote in here from the book of Hebrews. Well, actually, before I do that, you talked about evidence that you gained through the tragic, and my heart goes out to you. I have 2 children, and of course, every parent's worst fear. I can't imagine what it would be like to lose one of my children. Thank you so much for sharing that deeply personal experience in this context, which, again, from some of those who would say, well, your experience and whatever they might say as to how and why that experience came about, or perhaps your desire to find meaning. And you know what others might say, but for you, it was deeply real. And you used the word evidence, right? Unpack that for us a little bit more in terms of the power of that evidence, and how and why you would use the word evidence.
Well, evidence is something that leads you to believe something, right? Just in broad terms. What's the evidence for the theory of gravitation? Well, there's all kinds of evidence because we can predict how planets move and all that. So evidence is something that you experience. It leads you to believe something. Scientific evidence is stuff that happens that is replicable. You can do an experience, an experiment, and you document how you did it, and you document results, and other people can perform the same experiment, confirm your results. So it's public. It's out there in the world. There's private evidence that's subjective, we might call it. Only each one of us, whoever's evidence it is, only you are conscious of it. It happens only to you. So in my case, Katie, the disembodied Katie that was speaking through this woman that I'd never met before, was talking about stuff that I knew about, Katie knew about, but there was no way anybody else in the room would know about it. And so that was convincing evidence to me. And there were some other things. I encourage people to go to my website and read the essay, An Impeccable Death. So James's point is, if there are supremely important questions, like how am I going to live my life? What's the meaning of life? These big, important questions.
There's and who is James?
Oh, well, I'm sorry, William James, famous American pragmatist philosopher.
Thank you.
Right. Not my nephew. So William James says, for these great, big, important questions that you're sort of forced to confront, there isn't any scientific evidence, but there's your own personal evidence. You have a right to believe that personal evidence and take action on it, and then see how it works out in your life. That makes sense so far?
Absolutely. Well, I want to jump in here because I want to dig back a little bit into this and provide something that's been useful to me throughout my journey. Now, I had a similar experience. And by the way, as an aside, we're looking for our favorite comment to give these books to, right? And one of the books that we're going to give them, one of yours, one of mine, People of the Sign, the center point of my first book, The People of the Sign, is an experience that I had at age 19. Very similar to that of your daughter, but even more concrete. When I was 19, I was up in Alaska, and I was not exactly a good little boy. I was in a high-speed chase, in which I was the object of the chase, and the chasers were the Alaska State Troopers.
That's a great movie.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
It gets better. I attempted to outrun them, and I took an exit off of the Alcan. No, it wasn't the Alcan Highway. It was the. I'm drawing a brain freeze on what the name of the highway was, but it's between Palmer and Anchorage. And it was late at night. It was April. The road was dry, but there was still snow. I took an exit I didn't know, and I was doing 120 miles an hour when I took that exit. And I was immediately faced with a decision: either go left under the highway and there was like a cement or a stone wall, or go right and go back up on the highway, right? So I hesitated between right and left because it was going so fast, and I'd also turned my lights off to escape from the police, and flicked them back on. Saw the wall. In my indecision and fear of getting caught and all that, I did neither. I went straight off the road, in between the left and the right. And I won't even go into everything else. When I got out of jail, I survived unharmed, completely unharmed. I went sailing off an embankment into the snow, plowed into the snow. I had a Firebird Esprit, which is a Trans Am without the trim, 350 engine. The steam from that snow sent up a mushroom cloud, and the state trooper saw it as he flew by the exit and came backing back down the other side and had his gun and saw me and got me in the car. I got out of jail the next morning because apparently when you were 19 in Alaska at that time, your dad could get you out. That's a whole nother story. It was not a pleasant thing, but I came back to the scene to see my car. They had pulled my car out already. They had towed it out from the front, right? So they pulled it back onto the highway. So the tracks were very clear. And there in black and white, black where I had slammed on my brakes and gone straight, and white in the snow, the tire tracks, like this headset. Imagine this is one of those fake arrows, right? Where you have an arrow going in here and an arrow going out here, right? You've seen those? Mm-hmm. In between the black and the white was a light pole, a metal light pole standing, untouched, unharmed. I walked around and around and around that light pole, looking at it from every side in shock. I had not even seen the light pole in that situation. All I had heard was this noise of the tires and rushing blood in my head or whatever. Also, I had the music cranked up. Elvis Costello's Waiting for the End of the World off of his first album.
Quite appropriate.
And, yeah, exactly. And there's a little bit of embellishment. I don't know if that song was playing, but that was the album that was playing. And what struck me like an arrow through the heart was God saved my life, not because I was being obedient at that moment. And that changed and altered the course of my life. So the reason I brought it up in the context of the people of Sinai, I wrote that book, names, dates, places, to center that story in the middle. I don't care if anyone else ever believes it, but I know it was real. It was for me. It wasn't for you. It wasn't for me to convince you that there's a divine something, right? You know, as I've told this story, everyone always says, yeah, sure. You know, how do you know, whatever? Do you really, it was that long ago? How do you remember? Blah, 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 whatever, whatever. People always remember things differently in retrospect. You know, there's that. You can't trust eyewitnesses. You know, go study your history. They always discount eyewitnesses and they remember the details differently.
Yeah, but for your life, you're the eyewitness. You're the one who has to trust or not trust your own eyewitnessing, right?
Right. And so now here's the thing. Hebrews 11, verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And now I'm going to push deeper into this, because in verse 6 of that same chapter, I'm going to now push and say it's not subjective. It can be duplicated. And here's why. Paul gives the answer as to how to duplicate those experiences in verse 6 of Hebrews 11. Can't post messages to some channels. What? Oh, here we go. But without faith, it is impossible to please him, for he that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now, I believed that at that moment. It's just that I wasn't believing I would get it, right? Because I was not doing the things that would result in a reward. I was being disobedient to the moral code that you were talking about. I was doing the things that there's reasons why I was trying to escape from the police, right? But But the fact is, I believed that there was a God. I just wasn't willing to worship him for all kinds of reasons, which I won't bore the audience with right now. But I did have this basic belief. So anyone, and this is my belief, anyone who wants to prove that there is a God can do so to his or her own satisfaction. But everybody that wants to prove that there is not a God can also do so to his or her own satisfaction. There is this subjective bias. You mentioned that it's subjective, right? These experiences, this evidence is subjective. But are we honest? Can we be honest with ourselves and our own heart about what that bias is, right? What's your reaction to all of this? The fact that we're you found that evidence, and maybe you were neutral, but maybe you were at least open to it. Or were you at that moment wanting not to believe it? Were you, in other words, is this statement from Paul true here that, first of all, it's evidence? Faith is the substance of things, not substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And that if you want to come to God, you must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
Let me say something about faith. The most derogatory thing you can say about faith is that quality by which we believe what we should otherwise have thought false. In other words, you believe without sufficient evidence.
Blind faith. Blind faith.
That's right. Blind faith. Great. Right. That's not really worthy of a true human being.
It might be hope. It might be hope.
Okay, but so there's
but don't call it faith. Right.
Right. So, but there's another kind of faith that particularly if you're in some kind of what I might call wisdom school, where people are saying the world is like this, and you go, well, it'd be nice if it were like that. I'm not sure if it is, but I like to believe it. And then they give you some certain practices to do. Read your Bible, or chant Hare Krishna, or observe your breath, or there's lots of different ways to do it.
Yep.
And they say you don't have to start out believing it, but give it a try. Have at least enough faith to say, well, it might work.
It might be.
And I'll give it a try.
Mm-hmm.
Then if the results of your practice give you more evidence for yourself that, yeah, it works. And your faith grows and grows and grows because you're seeing the results of it. Not because somebody says you must have faith or else you're going to go to hell or whatever, but because it works for you. That's the kind of faith that I think is worthy. And the Buddha says, don't take anything I say on faith, find out for yourself.
Right.
And that's what you did. That's what I did to answer your earlier question. Whether I was somehow hoping that Katie was still alive or not, I was in such a state of shock and bemusement and numbness that I wasn't thinking about that at all. I mean, in the abstract, I would say, yeah, sure. I think I think people live on after death, and I think it's pretty probable. But it's not like I was looking for evidence to support that belief. It's like I was saying, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then here this woman says, oh, Katie wants to say something to you. I'm going, what? Okay, what does she say? We're just in it. And so it's not like I was trying to prove something, but the world showed me some stuff that says there really is, in this case, life after death. And by the way, let me add to that. It sounds awful. It sounds horrible. Oh my God, my daughter died, just cut off I think she was like 31 or 32 years old, prime of life. And I was just devastated. But one of the people in her group, her practice group, that was a Native American oriented thing, said that when she went on, this is sort of take this on faith. This is the story I got. Katie died instantly, went to the other side, met somebody that she perceived as a grandfather figure. And by the way, I was very happy that she was leading. She met with a sympathetic, loving male figure. I sort of identify with that. And she's turning into an eagle spirit so she can be of service 24/7. whoa, what a gig. That's amazing. Good for you, Katie. Well done. And ever since then, it's like been a blessing that I know Katie's there in some other form. Sometimes I don't think about it. I go through my life, but sometimes I see a bird or something happens. I go, oh yeah, Katie. And in that sense, horrible as it was a blessing. Now, is that because I'm deluded and have faith in something that can't possibly happen? No. It's because in my life, stuff works and it's beneficial to me and hence to the people around me. And so I'm probably getting some of the details wrong. You're saying, well, how do you know? How can you remember all that stuff? I wrote it down pretty soon after it happened.
No. First of all, I believe you, and obviously my experience has that similarity. I'm just saying that for others, your experience, my experience, is not relevant for them, but they can also access the same experiences. Is all I'm saying.
They can access their version of that experience.
Exactly.
They don't access your experience of you were like this quantum particle that emitted from here and was in some indeterminate state and was detected on the other side of the barrier.
I have no idea how it happened. I know that it happened. I don't doubt that it happened. It changed my life. Why? Because of the gift of knowing that the true power of love, right? So I mean, I will go there. I don't ever want to say anything bad about my parents, but if you read the book, People of the Sign, you will know that bad things could be said about my parents. And I didn't understand God's love. Nothing that I had experienced, well, some things, many things, most things, enough things, an aggregate of things that I had experienced as a child made it difficult for me to comprehend the depth of God's love for me. And in that moment, that's the moment he chose to reveal his love for me. And it was powerful. As I stood and I looked at those tracks and I said, why? Why did you save me? And literally in that moment, I said, my mother was already dead at that time. And I kind of divorced my father, especially after the way in which he got me out of jail, right? Not exactly the prodigal sons kind of situation.
Didn't welcome you back. Okay.
No, he was basically saying my preference would have been to leave you here to rot.
Oh, thanks, Dad.
But it is backhanded way he was showing his love for me, but I didn't, it's like, yeah, whatever, Dad. So the point is that at that moment, God decided, okay, now you'll be open to it at this moment because you didn't deserve to be saved. There's nothing you were doing at that moment. You should be dead, my young man. And I said, well, so I basically said, my father is now dead to me and you, God, have now adopted me. I am your responsibility. Basically transactional. You saved my life. You now are responsible for me. I'm yours. I didn't say it in the sense of now I'm going to serve you, but it was more like I'm your problem now.
Right. Oh, okay.
And that actually served me relatively well throughout my life. And God then treated me as a child and gradually trained me and helped me grow up. And others can discount that, but to your point, for me, hey, it worked. So I want to now get to this other question I have, which is you talked about the religions each bringing something special. Yeah. What is that? Why is that? How is that? What would you like to share to unpack that a little bit for us?
To answer that question, I'm going to quote some things from a religious service, which is called the Universal Worship. And it's a service that honors many different world religions. And at one point in that service, we give thanks for Hinduism. We give thanks for the light of the divine wisdom. For Buddhism, we say we give thanks for the light of the divine compassion. Zoroastrian, we give thanks for the light of the divine purity. Native American, we give thanks for the light of the divine nature, the divine feminine, which is badly overlooked these days. It's coming back, which is good. We give thanks to the light of the divine love. The Sikh religion, we give thanks to the light of the divine service. The Baha'i faith, we give thanks to the light of the divine saintliness. Taoist, we give light to the divine harmony. Jewish, we give light of the divine we give thanks for the light of the divine covenant. Christianity, we give thanks to the light of the divine self-sacrifice. Islam, we give thanks for the light of the divine unity. Each of the religions has a certain gift, and those are one way of recognizing those gifts. Not to mention all the beauty of high mass liturgical stuff, or Tibetan Buddhism, which is very much like, in some ways, like Roman Catholicism, so like deities and colors and all kinds of stuff, or the complete simplicity of the other kind of Buddhism, where you sit and just observe your breath and then observe your mind, or the Taoists, you find a way to be in harmony with that which can't be said. You can find beauty in each one of those. Depending on our upbringing, we feel a certain harmony or attraction or feeling for whichever one it is. Like in my case, I was raised Christian, and there are certain things I really like about Christianity and other things I don't, and so forth. It's like, okay, in your terms, God loves us. God expressed that love to different people in different cultures and different times in a way that they could hear, and sort of the coin of the realm that was appropriate for those people at that time, and then it carries on, and we find inspiration in it.
Well, absolutely, and as I like to explain, if we reflect on it, and I do have a degree in theology, I've studied biblical archaeology. I was at the City of David Archaeological Expedition in Jerusalem many years ago. All of these experiences have shaped my understanding, and digging through a tell, right, and unpacking layer by layer by layer the various civilizations. If anyone's ever read James Missioner's The Source, right, it's a great sort of fictional way of digging into that. The language and the concepts that were accessible, or that the people at that time had, right? If, as I believe, there is such a thing as divine revelation, that a messenger comes and brings a message for those people at that time to inspire and motivate and guide, that supreme power has to limit itself to the language and the concepts accessible to the human beings at that time and in that culture.
Bingo, you got it.
So it's limited. It's limited by us, right? And the beauty that we can manifest, and the horror that we can manifest through our misunderstanding and our misapplication of that divine beauty. It's like every pillar casts a shadow. The pillar might hold up the roof, but it casts a shadow. Every time you put something in the foreground, by definition, something else recedes to the background. And we focus on one thing at the expense of another, oftentimes, and things aren't balanced out. They aren't done in moderation. To your point about going and telling people it's like this, it's like this, it's like this, right? And insisting on orthodoxy and declaring those who don't ascribe to the orthodoxy of being heretics, which we're going to go to a commercial break. The commercial break is about a very special anthology. I want to invite you, Bill, and anyone else watching to contribute to this anthology, your own perspective on it. When we come back, we're going to look through some of the comments, engage with some of them, and decide who's going to get the giveaways tonight. But I'm really excited about this anthology. It says it's by me. It's not by me. I'm the curator. I do plan to provide a contribution to it. But it's going to be an overview of different perspectives from different religions and even from the non-religious on this topic, which has shaped both the good and the bad in religion over the centuries. Stay tuned.
The concept of heaven and hell has been a central idea throughout human thought and cultural history. From ancient civilizations to modern religions, people have explored the nature of the afterlife and the potential consequences of their actions during their lifetime. Royal Falcon Press Imprint presents a new project seeking diverse perspectives on the fundamental human theme of heaven and hell. Our goal is to create an anthology that provides readers with a rich and nuanced exploration of heaven and hell throughout human history, inviting writers to draw from a wide range of sources and authors, including religious texts such as the Bible and the Quran, philosophical treatises like Plato's Republic, and modern works like Neil Gaiman's The Sandman series or Michelle Baum's The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. We would love to have your input on the final cover for this thrilling new endeavor. Choose your favorite among these options and let us know your pick in the comments. Scan the QR code to read more about Heaven and Hell Across History and Religions by Wade Franson and register for the final cover choice.
So I'm excited about this because one of the tenets of this show, and it ties in with some of the things you've said over the course of it, is religion must inspire, not coerce. And throughout history, adherents of one doctrine, creed, set of religious beliefs, especially in Christianity, frankly, have cast others who believe differently into hell, figuratively. And yet heaven and hell, as we study the text of the Bible from which these concepts are supposedly derived, are very, very different from the conceptions that have been promoted by the supposed adherents of those holy texts. And so we want to open this up to be a broad exploration of the topic that can help people come to a different and hopefully a better understanding of all of the things that you've mentioned and much more. So if I can get rid of that, and then we'll share a couple of the quotes. First, a nice one here by Steve. Thank you so much for the kudos that you've enjoyed this episode. We've got others that, and my daughter's cat Licorice is now trying to jump into my lap here. Apologize if you're hearing some disturbance there. Faith does not exist outside of fiction. Christians never think. Since not everyone is aware of deity, the title is fudged. So we have thoughts on multiple sides of this perspective. There's a chance to share your comments still. Bill, what are your thoughts here? I've held forth quite a bit over the course of this. What are your thoughts based on the experience you've had and the discussion so far tonight that you'd like to share as we move towards the end of the show?
Okay, I'm sorry. My thoughts about
just in general, what's coming to mind
okay.
as you listen to me go on and what we've shared here together and what you're trying to bring to the audience tonight.
Well, I go back to the Buddha. Don't believe anything any of us say. You got a great story. I got a great story. Yours is meaningful to you. Mine is meaningful to me. I hope mine's a little meaningful to you. I hope yours is meaningful to me. I've heard some similar stories. I totally believe it. But don't, to say to the audience out here, don't just believe it because we said so. Do your own investigation. Find your own way of approaching the higher power, that disembodied agency that has a benevolent interest in you. Start out, if you go, there's a great quote by Rumi. I hope I can remind it. If you can't pray sincerely, offer your dry, hypocritical, agnostic prayer, because God, in his mercy, accepts bad coin. So just do something to open yourself a little bit and see what happens. That's all.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share another comment here and pose this question to you from A.M. Sterling. Able to read that? Does philosophy necessarily include spirituality? If not, how do the two camps get along? Do they see each other as missing something in their worldview?
Philosophy does not necessarily include spirituality. Philosophy, and the root meaning of the word, is love of wisdom, philia, kind of companionable love, Sophia, wisdom. So if spirituality is part of your life, then you want to be wise about it and include that in your worldview and figure out how it relates to the non-spiritual parts of your life. If spirituality is not at all part of your life, don't worry about it. Find wisdom in what you can find wisdom in. And as I recommend, do good to other people, benefit everything as much as possible. It's not a hard and fast rule. It's just good advice. Try to be of benefit to those around you. And in so doing, you'll be a benefit to yourself. Make sure you're doing stuff to keep yourself healthy in order that you can be a benefit to others. Okay? So there's not two camps, philosophical and spiritual. There's some spiritual people that are very philosophical. There's some spiritual people that aren't. They're just the concepts don't matter to them. It's like their experience and how their life works. There's some philosophers that say, poof, to spirituality is worthless, and there's others that say, particularly the Christian theologians in the Middle Ages, philosophy was thought of as a handmaiden to theology. Philosophy was a way of clarifying some concepts that the real truth came from theology. It's like not one or the other. It's ways that you interact and benefit each other.
Thank you. Dan, do you want to, I know you're still with us there somewhere in the ether. Is there anything you want to share with us as we wind down tonight?
I think we're good. I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation. My camera seems to be a little bit off, but I'm still in the magical cabin in the woods. Camera keeps moving on me there. No, Bill, I enjoyed it. I think Bill needs a little bit of a longer runway to get a point across, I think. And the explanation is
it's well thought out.
Well thought out and well appreciated. And there's a bit of an art to what Bill's doing, because you can see how it kind of slowly weaves it in and brings it all to a nice point, usually. And so I really enjoyed listening to that. And I hope the audience really enjoyed listening to we'll call it the monologue or the recorded pre-interview. I encourage you guys to go to his site, check him out. He's got a couple books, delve into them, and experience Bill for yourself. That's and you discovered him here. So that's all I can say.
Well, I'm going to bring up one more quote here from Russell. Because this is interesting. Suggesting we must all travel together, as if we all prefer leadership with one foot in fantasy land. And Dan, I'm interested in your take on this, because I often quote, Plato, I believe it was, and it's my version of his quote: "Man is a political animal." I love that Aristotle. I love that version of it, right? Zon politikon, right? A social creature, I think, is the intent. Although I love the translation political animal, because it has these overtones, right? Where man is a social creature. Guess what? We are a social creature. We do travel together, right? We are more like, I don't know, dogs, or in some ways maybe trending towards bees and ants, right? Than we are cats. And I've got my daughter's cat Licorice here in my lap, who tend to wander off meowing in different directions. And again, on the show, we talk about religion not coercing, but it should inspire. But we desire that community. We desire that communion with one another. It's a basic human need recognized through many of the sciences, that man desires to create a social structure in which he belongs and contributes. So,
but not just desires. If an isolated human is a dead human. We are the ethologists call, we are obligatorily gregarious. We can't survive without other people.
Certainly our species can't procreate without other species. I mean,
yeah.
they're working on that now in terms of not needing men and women to procreate, which is, I won't go there. I'd go there too often. But so what do we make of this comment here from Russell?
I'll also say something. I mean, just to kind of set the stage. The word Fantasyland is not helpful if you don't strip it of all of its negative connotation, right? It's almost, it's belittling, and I've said before, and it's a hard thing for me to move forward with, is that if I could get the religious community and people of faith to have a conversation where they were just a little bit more honest with themselves and realize the power of myth, realize the power of heuristic, realize the power of pretend, then I think we would have more of a consilience, a coming together, and people would be saying a lot of the same things. The issue and the warning in that is that those words that I chose, I don't know what the better word is. When I say pretend, just like in this comment, they say Fantasyland, it almost is insulting, right? So I don't mean to belittle. I can't say a word like pretend without, let's come up with a better one. That means,
well,
like,
and Russell, you know, we'll have a dialogue with you here with the comments. We'd love to have you on the show to dialogue with you in person. Christians demand ownership of the narrative. Yes, some do, right? Many do. But are you not trying to demand ownership of the narrative right now? I mean, is that kind of not your point, Dan, of words like Fantasyland? And I'm seeing a host of very dogmatic comments coming from you, Russell, as you seek to control the narrative and swing it in a different direction, right? But what we're actually wanting on this show is not to control the narrative, but rather to have a dialogue.
Have a dialogue, which is really great. But the thing is that it rings like, and it sounds like the new atheist thing, which I understand. I was a participant in it. I pulled and extracted and continue to extract from that, I guess, important point in time that spoke to me. No, guys, that's exactly what happened, right? And that's what people are warning, and the academics and the wise people in society are warning us all against. And be careful that the new atheist movement doesn't turn into a religious movement in and of itself, some cult-like behavior that doesn't even have an ability to check itself against its surrounding and its other team members, right?
I'm having fun now. What is prophecy but Fantasyland language? No, it's history written in advance by a being that exists outside of time and space, and therefore can do so. And it's actually discernible, and it can be pursued on that basis, and it can be shown to be accurate or inaccurate. And there's much debate about it, but I think it's an interesting discussion. I'm not insisting. That's my perspective. Yours is that it's Fantasyland language, but if you're interested in a dialogue, we could actually explore that. Let me get rid of Licorice here. She's not supposed to be up on my desk. All right. So guys, we got to pick a favorite comment here. I'm enjoying some of Russell's, but I don't know that I want to suggest them as the favorite. But we do have to award the free books to one of our participants here.
Well, who would?
Can I just break in here a little bit about this last few minutes?
Sure.
There's a very salient two verses in the Bible, Proverbs 26, 4 and 5.
I'm familiar with them.
Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. So what I'm suggesting is this: you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, I don't like your language. Well, I don't like your language. It's a bunch of fools talking to each other. So let's try to be, where is the common ground? Where can we find, if we're all looking for some meaning in our life, if we're all looking for some, if we're all looking to figure out how to deal with what's real, what shall we do? Having a bit of compassion for each other, having a bit of trying to understand the other, try to find what's true in what appears to be offensive verbiage. I say that from both sides, right? Try to find something you can agree with. Try to find some common ground and work from there. Okay, so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you. Here's another one from Steve Eaton. Somebody want to read it?
I'm going to let Bill take that one.
Isn't the ordained lifetime arc from total egoism to relatively pure altruism almost the most basic teaching of all religions? Ego is definitely identified as the only source of evil. Maybe self-actualization was the top of Maslow's hierarchy. It goes on, but I forget the rest of it. So,
yep.
But there is, for many wisdom traditions talk about if you're self-centered in a very narrow way, thinking that you're separate from other people, separate from the world, and you want to get yours and the hell with everybody else, and it's actually self-defeating. So that's the egoism. Now, I would argue that pure altruism, I'm just going to give everything to other people and I'm just going to be selfless and blah, blah, blah. That's self-defeating also, because after a while you burn out. You've got to take care. If you want to really be of service to other people, you got to take care of yourself so that you can continue to be of service. Make sense? However, I'd vote for, this is a pretty good, if you want to go for voting for who's got the best comment in the chat.
Our favorite, not best, it's just a subjective favorite of the hosts.
Right.
We get to be mercurial and subjective.
Okay.
We're not racking and stacking them against each other.
Okay. Anyway, I find this one a good one.
Well, Steve, congratulations. Send your info. And by the way, I have to say, typically we give these books to those in the United States. Shipping outside the US is very expensive. So we can't promise, but we'll do what we can. So let us have your information, Steve, to this email address, which I am now putting in the chat and will show on the screen. info@soupllc.com. Send us, Steve, your shipping information, your physical address so we can get that book to you. And we'll also send you a link to download the free ebooks. So thank you, Steve, for participating. Thanks to everybody who's been here on this show. It's been a total pleasure, Bill. I think we shall definitely have to invite you back and continue because I know there's a lot more where all that came from.
Well, it's been quite a pleasure being here with you all. Thank you so much. And many blessings to you.
Thank you. Unless you've got something to say, Dan. Good night, everyone. And we will see you next week, where we will have a very special guest whom we've been very excited to schedule. And now I've got to quickly, I've been doing a little research here while I talk. I got to find the right place so I get the notes correctly for the show. So next week, we will have Sasha Stone, who is a contributor to a number of magazines. We reached out to her after she wrote an article that is titled, "Did I Just Leave a Cult?" Because it feels like I kind of did. She's a well-known blogger and writer, and she has quite a following on Substack. So please tune in next week. We'll be having Sasha Stone talking about her experience with being in something that Russell Shute may refer to as the Matrix. Maybe there are different matrices, right? Russell feels we're in the Matrix. We are certainly in some kind of matrix, but there are different beliefs and different perspectives. One of the things that I've learned in my travels is wherever you go all around the world, all of us have one thing in common, and that is that we believe our perspective is the right one. Otherwise, we wouldn't be following it. Tune in next week to listen to Sasha Stone's perspective, and we guarantee you won't be disappointed. Yes.
Can I just make one final comment? We all follow what we follow, not necessarily because we think it's the right one, but because it's a good one. The right one, besides, there's one right one, everything else is wrong. No, there's a continuum. This is good, this is not so good, this is better, and so forth. So think of it in that sense. But anyway, thank you so much for having me.
That is, I think, a more advanced way of saying it. But as I'm sure you would agree, many do believe that it is the right one and that others are wrong.
Yes, too many believe that.
Yeah, and on this show, we are here to invite those other perspectives so that, as you mentioned, and to put it in a Baha'i context, that we can all independently investigate the truth. And you can't independently investigate the truth if you live in your little echo chamber, if you live in your bubble, if you live in a self-referential belief system in which any outside input can be rejected as wrong based on the rules that you use to defend what you believe.
Okay, here's the non-defensiveness. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. See you next